Vampires have been scaring us humans for several centuries now, so I guess it's about time we fought back. Well, that's exactly what Castlevania is all about. Though the franchise began as a video game back in 1986, Netflix's take on this dark fantasy saga is undoubtedly the most famous rendition of this story. Though the series is a peculiar mixture of drama, gore, and monster slaying, the series manages to come together in the form of a captivating and bloody spectacle. Honestly, vampire hunting has never been this fun before. Thus, in this marvelous video, we'll be exploring all the major vampire hunters who have appeared in the show so far, and this one is definitely going to be violent. However, before we move ahead with the slaying, please take a moment to hit the like and subscribe buttons. It might just be a small click for you, but to us it means an awful lot. With that out of our way, I guess it's finally time to hunt some vampires. Castlevania Seasons 1 to 4. Trevor Belmont. I guess there's no one better to begin this list with than everyone's favorite vampire-slaying drunkard, Trevor Belmont. Though he might just appear like your everyday ruffian at first glance, Trevor is actually one of the best to ever get into the business. He's the last surviving member of the renowned Belmont clan, a family who had dedicated their whole existence to hunting the creatures of the night. However, people in the Castlevania universe have never been the most rational, and they soon started believing that the clan was using black magic, which attracted evil to them. Thus, the church excommunicated the family, which led to the people destroying everything owned by the family. This tragic incident left Trevor all alone at a fairly early age, and the only ones to blame here are people his family had sworn to protect. Now, that's how you use irony in fiction. Years passed, and Trevor grew into a rough, perpetually drunk, and nihilistic individual. Though Trevor might seem to be an unempathetic and unconcerned thug, the Belmont blood runs deep, and he's genuinely one of the greatest heroes we've seen. Though he was reluctant at first, he would eventually join forces with Cipha and Alucard to rid the world of the malicious entity known as Dracula. Together, our three heroes would wage war on the creatures of darkness, and Trevor would finally show us why the Belmonts were so feared by forces of evil. Trevor is a tall and slightly bulky individual who's often seen with the shadow of a beard on his face. Interestingly, Trevor is pretty similar to Dracula, as they've both become misanthropic due to the actions of the church against their loved ones. However, Trevor's resentment towards humans is far more controlled, and unlike Dracula, he doesn't enjoy killing humans. Though many consider Trevor to be morally bankrupt, he's actually a protector at heart who just doesn't get along with others due to his excommunication. However, due to his trauma, he's also developed a protective attitude towards individuals who have been wronged as he was. In combat, he's an exceedingly courageous warrior who routinely undertakes adventures and quests that others wouldn't even dream about. Though he can be pretty aggressive and headstrong in certain situations, he's still one of the most likable guys around. Trevor is kind of arrogant in his combat skills, but I guess it's highly justified, as he's genuinely one of the deadliest fighters we've seen in the entire series. His prowess in battle is so exceptional that he could literally take on Dracula in close quarters combat. He also has an almost inhuman amount of endurance and can continue fighting even after suffering grievous injuries. After years of practice, he's become a master of numerous weapons, but his most trusted tools are his family whip and short sword, which he can wield simultaneously. Despite his antisocial behavior, Trevor Belmont is clearly a true hero of whom his ancestors would genuinely be proud. Cipha Belnades. The next in line is, of course, the sorceress Cipha, a descendant of nomadic scholars known as the Speakers, who were falsely accused by the church of instigating the attacks conducted by Dracula's army. It was because of this that the group had to go into hiding, but chose not to abandon their hometown of Gresset so that they could continue helping people in need. It was during this period that Cipha discovered her innate talent for elemental magic, and never really looked back. Sometime later, in 1476, Cipha ventured into the city's vast network of catacombs alone in order to find the legendary sleeping soldier who would rescue humanity from Lord Dracula. This expedition didn't go so well for young Cipha, as she encountered a Cyclops who turned her into stone. After all, that's what Cyclops do. Cipha might have stayed in the catacombs forever had her statue not been discovered by Trevor Belmont, who was sent by Cipha's grandfather to retrieve her body. After killing the Cyclops, the duo would return yet again, but this time they'd end up fighting the sleeping soldier, who would then become their third companion in the fight against Dracula. But more on him later. With short peachy hair and thin vermilion lips, Cipha is a conventionally pretty woman. Throughout the series, she can be seen wearing the traditional garb of the Speakers. She's also an adventurous and playful young woman who's considered to be the heart of the Dracula hunting team. Unlike her jaded companions, she's a bit softer in her perspective on life, but is also never afraid to openly speak her mind. As a magician, she's highly educated in both sorcery and the history of Wallachia, which is pretty handy when fighting an overpowered monster such as Dracula. An altruistic idealist, she's known for conviction and isn't the kind of person who would back away from battle. Though Cipha finds Trevor downright insufferable at the beginning of their long journey, their bond deepens over time, and the two eventually fall in love with each other. One of the most powerful sorcerers in the entire series, her mastery over magic allows her to control multiple elements like fire, ice, wind, and electricity. She lacks the physicality of her male counterparts, but her conditioning is still far beyond that of normal humans. Alucard, Adrian Tepesh. Moving on to the most tragic character in the entire series, Dracula's estranged son and our third protagonist, Alucard. Nicknamed the Anti-Dracula, Alucard is a Dhampir who was born to Dracula and the human scholar Lisa Tepesh. About 20 years after Alucard's birth, Lisa was accused of witchcraft and was burnt at the stake. In response to the tragedy, Dracula summoned an entire army from hell. Alucard confronted his father, but Dracula was beyond convincing at this point. Thus, the father and son fought with each other, and Alucard still has a large scar on his chest as a reminder of this battle. After his defeat, Alucard went into the catacombs beneath the city of Gresset and placed himself in a coffin. Over time, a legend began to spread among the townsfolk that stated that a sleeping soldier lay beneath the city of Gresset, waiting to be revived by a hunter and scholar. And guess what? That's exactly what happened. In the series, Alucard is depicted as a very handsome individual with a chiseled face and pale skin. His blonde curls reach down to his back, and his golden eyes can be pretty intimidating at first glance. Alucard can usually be seen wearing tight leather clothing and boots with a large cape draped around his shoulders. Interestingly, Alucard's personality perfectly exemplifies his mixed heritage, as he inherited the best qualities of both his parents. He possesses the intelligence and combat prowess of his bloodthirsty father, but these qualities are blanched by his mother's class and kindness. Calm and composed, this is a guy who rarely gives in to his emotions, even when participating in the most violent fights. Alucard's most remarkable quality is a strong sense of justice, and he refused to harm humans even after his mother's harrowing execution. After joining Trevor and Cipha, an even more human side of Alucard came to light, and he developed a genuine respect for his comrades' skills and personalities. Though he's also prone to depressive spells, like the one that followed his father's death, he always finds it within himself to recover and move ahead. Though Alucard is forever destined to be a loner due to his nature, we have seen him form true bonds with the humans around him, which is both wholesome and heartbreaking at the same time. Due to his Dhampir physiology, Alucard's physical attributes are far beyond even the strongest of humans, and over the years, we've seen him exhibit superhuman speed, strength, durability, and endurance. Even if you manage to harm this guy, he'll just get back up, as his regenerative abilities are unparalleled. In addition to his physical prowess, he's also pretty adept at using telekinesis in battle and can also shapeshift into various animals. Though his magical abilities aren't as evident as Cipha's, he's still a naturally talented sorcerer who can use magical objects and conjure weapons. Alucard's most trusted weapon is his sword, which he can manipulate with magic in whatever way he deems fit. Honestly, if we were vampires, we'd just flee whenever we came across this guy. Leon Belmont. Leon Belmont, the founder of the Belmont clan, is revered as one of the finest hunters ever to walk the earth. He was actually the first person in history to have fought Dracula and was a renowned knight before he turned to the monster slaying. As a master of the craft, he was feared by vampires all across the land, and it's a tragedy that we never got to see this guy in action. He was also the first person to use the Morningstar whip and was directly responsible for beginning the vampire hunting tradition of the Belmont clan. The only time he appears in the series is through a portrait hung above the basement in the Belmont stronghold. A true pioneer, he was also responsible for moving the Belmont clan to Wallachia in order to face their arch-nemesis Dracula. Historical records state that Leon rode into battle against Dracula with a Celt named Trevor, whom Trevor is named after. Christopher Belmont. Christopher Belmont is another legendary hunter who is actually the protagonist of the first two Castlevania games. According to the game's timeline, Christopher faces Count Dracula about 100 years after Trevor Belmont's first visit to Dracula's castle, but it's difficult to say how this fits into the Netflix storyline. He gained notoriety in the late 1600s for his heroic deeds against the vampires. Though not much is known about his personality, the comic book series Castlevania: The Belmont Legacy depicts Christopher as a reluctant hero who's drawn into action after being plagued by constant nightmares featuring Dracula. His concerns are further aggravated by the Dark Lord's terrible actions in the past, and Christopher hopes that he never has to face the same circumstances that Trevor did. When Dracula is resurrected, the vampire immediately desecrates Christopher's parents' grave, which becomes the final straw for our hero. He eventually overcame his fear and reluctance, which enabled him to grow into the legendary hero we know today. Simon Belmont. Simon is another Belmont who's barely mentioned in the Netflix series. He was actually the main protagonist of the original Castlevania and is a near-mythical hero from the 17th century. For fans of the game, he's easily the most recognizable of all the protagonists, and over the years, we've seen various incarnations of these characters in different forms of media. Simon was born around 1669 and was declared to be the heir of the infamous vampire killer whip. Due to this, he received rigorous training in the art of vampire hunting from a fairly young age, and developed a special interest in the numerous stories centering around the vampire Lord Dracula. By the time he was 22, he finally found a golden opportunity to prove himself worthy of his family's legacy as Count Dracula returned to the mortal plane about 100 years after his defeat at the hands of Christopher Belmont. This begins the starting point of Simon's journey to prevent a new era of terror, and he enters Dracula's castle to face the fearsome vampire all alone. Along the way, he slew many of Dracula's servants and gained recognition as a legendary warrior just like his ancestors. Castlevania: Nocturne. Richter Belmont. A young Belmont wielding the vampire killer whip, Richter is the protagonist of Netflix's newest addition to the vampire hunting saga, Castlevania: Nocturne. He's known for his power and cunningness as the current owner of the renowned vampire hunter whip. Richter's hatred towards vampires comes from his mother's brutal murder at the hands of a vampire, which he witnessed firsthand as a young child. This would drive Richter to become one of the greatest hunters in the entire Belmont line. And that's no small feat. Richter resides in the small town of Machecoul, France, with his Aunt Tara and her daughter Maria. For Richter, vampire hunting is truly a family business, and he often teams up with Tara's daughter Maria to fight the undead horde of vampires. Though Richter is highly proficient as a vampire hunter, he often tends to be overconfident and exudes an air of youthful bravado. Though he sports a carefree attitude in front of others, his entire life has been marred by a constant series of personal struggles. It's evident from the beginning of Richter's journey that he hasn't gotten over his traumatic childhood, and many of his decisions are driven by the painful memory of his mother's murder. Richter also suffers from self-doubt and is often concerned by the worthiness of his actions. In battle, Richter relies more on instinct than on strategy, which can be detrimental at times. Despite this, he's a selfless and compassionate hero who genuinely wants to protect the innocent from the creatures of the night. Richter is a descendant of Cipha, and thus he has inherited many of her magic skills. He can use elements like fire, ice, and electricity just like his ancestors, but it seems that his mastery of these techniques surpasses that of Cipha. He's also a very formidable martial artist and whip fighter, which allows him to stand his ground even when the magic fails. Though Richter still has a long way to go to be considered a legend like others in his family, we couldn't be more excited for this bloody and glorious journey. Annette. a freedom fighter using elemental magic. Unlike many on this list, Annette does not come from a prestigious line of vampire hunters. Instead, she was born as a slave in the Caribbean before traveling to Europe in order to seek Richter. Here, she would end up joining a group of revolutionaries to wage war against vampires and slavery. Annette's journey began on a plantation around Saint-Dominique as a slave. However, she later learnt about her ancestry, and it's believed that she is descended from the divine spirits Ogun on her father's side and Orunmila on her mother's. These spirits are called Orishas, and Ogun was revered as the Orisha of war and iron, while Orunmila was the Orisha of divination, intelligence, and wisdom. Annette only came to know of her ancestry after her mother was brutally murdered for using magic, and her vampire master even ordered his minions to brand Annette. She managed to escape by using her newfound abilities to craft a blade from dust and metal particles, with which she successfully deflected the branding iron. She makes her way into the city, where she encounters Edouard, who helps her flee and leads her to the heart of the revolution against slavery. During her time with the revolutionaries, Annette met a voodoo mambo named Cecile, who introduced the young girl to her own ancestry. Annette comes across as a passionate revolutionary with a strong sense of justice as well as a relentless desire to protect the innocent. Due to this, she can often get reckless in battle, but is a formidable ally nonetheless. Annette's worldview is shaped by a series of hardships and independence, which makes her a rather unforgiving individual who values strength over everything else. As the descendant of Orisha, Annette can manipulate earth and metal using magic, both of which she can use masterfully in battle. She's also capable of performing voodoo magic and possesses extremely well-honed skills with the sword. Maria Renard, prodigy summoning magical beasts. Maria, the daughter of Speaker Terra and Richter's adoptive sister, is a talented and powerful witch who resides in Machecoul, France. She's a fierce revolutionary who's relentlessly advocating for justice and equality. Maria's father, Emmanuel, was actually the town's abbot, and for much of her life she believed him to be dead. Thus, she grew up alone in a small cottage nestled in the hills until her mother adopted Richter. Richter and Maria would grow up as siblings and later join forces in their fight against the vampires. She bears a fair complexion and has eyes that are emerald in color. Her blonde hair falls down to her hips and is usually tied together with a green ribbon that matches the color of her eyes. A bold and idealistic individual, Maria has a strong desire to fight against the rampant injustices in her country. Her quick wit and sharp tongue make her a nightmare for the people she hates, but she also has endless loyalty for the ones she loves. Maria's rough childhood has instilled in her a lot of empathy and resilience, which is exactly what makes her such a brilliant leader. Though Maria has always been a talented witch, she has honed her skills even further through constant battles and practice. Maria's talent lies in summoning animal familiars from the otherworld through spells, and over the years, we've seen her summon everything from birds to dragons in order to aid her in battle. Each of these animals has different uses and can be either offensive or defensive. However, when Maria's negative emotions overwhelm her, Maria can also use dark magic to summon dark creatures from the abyss, like scorpions, wolves, and even a mysterious creature made out of shadows. Though these creatures are extremely powerful, they drain her rapidly and can even corrupt her. In spite of this, Maria is a true inspiration due to her unwavering commitment to justice. Edouard, brave fighter turned vampire hunter. Edouard began his journey as a prolific opera singer, but it all changed when he met Annette and joined her quest to annihilate the vampires. Together, the duo traveled all across Europe to accomplish this goal, and Edouard was instrumental in saving Richter from a night creature. However, Edouard was tragically turned into a night creature during a raid on a nest of vampires, as he wasn't as fast as the others in his party. Despite this, he wasn't reduced to a mindless, bloodthirsty creature, and somehow maintained the memories of his past. Edouard was a remarkably generous and amicable man who was also capable of exceptional courage when the situation called for it. He was extremely concerned by the economic and social divides in France and showed genuine interest in bringing about change. As a vampire hunter, Edouard displayed considerable skill with the sword, but his powers were increased significantly when he turned into a night creature. Tara. A vampire hunter in Nocturne before she became a vampire, Tara is a former speaker who originally hails from Russia. However, she was forced to flee her homeland and settle in France due to persecution by different military groups who had begun using vampires as soldiers. She would later have a relationship with Abbot Emmanuel and give birth to one of the show's central characters, Maria. She was also the one who took young Richter in after his mother was killed by a vampire. As a speaker, Tara had powerful magical abilities like pyrokinesis, cyrokinesis, and aerokinesis, which make her an extremely formidable opponent. Though Tara is one of the most compassionate characters in the entire series, she's still capable of standing her ground and fighting for justice when the situation calls for it. Marvelous verdict. Vampires are undoubtedly some of the most dreadful and evil creatures we've ever seen. Thus, we're pretty fortunate to have so many powerful warriors standing in their way. Though each of these hunters is different in their own way, all of them are true heroes for all of mankind, and we're sure that there will be plenty of warriors who will take up the tradition in the future. Well, that's it for now, but do let us know which hunter is your favorite in the comments below. Also, don't forget to hit the subscribe button to stay updated on all our marvelous content. Goodbye for now, but don't worry, because we'll catch up with you in the next one really soon.